All right, the man running the United States military just admitted in Congress that he has no idea what his own war cost the American taxpayer. $600. That's the number. That's what each American owes for a war Pete Hegseth called an astounding military success. A success where Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. A success where his response was, "We blockaded their blockade." But here's where embarrassing becomes criminal. Seth Moulton, a Marine who fought in Iraq, pulled out Hegseth's own press conference words and asked whether ordering troops to give no quarter is a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. The answer he got back tells you everything.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes a gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you and I agree that Iran is a national security threat to us and our allies. Now, earlier you called us feckless for questioning your war. Do you think Congress was smart or feckless when it failed to ask tough questions of the Bush administration and gave them a blank check for Iraq?
Well, if you're trying to compare this war to the Iraq
I'm just asking
war,
if you think it was smart or
the
feckless.
first one to call a stupid war, then it's a false comparison.
Okay, well, probably a good idea to ask tough questions. So let me just ask you a few questions. Did you advise the president that we should attack Iran?
We were, first of all, in this position in the cabinet, we never talk about what we would advise the president to do or not.
Do you think the president or you deserve more?
I've been in every meeting.
I understand
with
that,
the chairman
Mr. Secretary.
and everybody else as those
Secretary, I'm asking
decisions
the
were
questions.
made, and he got every perspective possible when it came.
I'm just asking what your perspective is. Are you afraid to take ownership of this? Do you think it was a good idea or not?
As I've consulted the president, do I think it's a good idea to confront a nuclear bomb
To start this
in the
war.
hands of the? Imagine what the world would look like right now if Iran had a nuclear weapon.
Okay, so let's
just imagine.
Which, by the way,
if they had one, which the
previous
Obama deal was going to allow them to do.
including the first Trump administration,
If they had one.
prevented them from having a nuclear weapon. So, listen, how is this war going? Do you think we're winning?
Militarily on the battlefield, it's been an astounding military success.
No, but are we winning the war?
Absolutely.
Okay, so do you call Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz winning?
Well, I would say the blockade that we hold that doesn't allow anything to come in or out of Iranian ports.
Okay, so
always
we've blockaded their blockade.
use.
So they blockaded us, and then we blockaded their blockade. That's like saying, tag, you're it. Or, you know, if President Madison had said, well, the British just burned down Washington, but don't worry, we're going to burn it down as well. Chairman Kaine, did the military have plans for the idea that Iran might blockade the Strait?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I'll answer it this way. You know, in this job, I have to maintain trust with a variety of constituents. To
Okay, I'm
include
just
the president.
asking if the military
Yes,
had
sir.
plans.
As always, my point in this is, as I explain the role, my point in this is we always offer a full range of military options that are carefully considered with the associated risks with those options and the considerations therein.
So,
and we
Mr.
always
Secretary,
do that.
did you consider this risk?
Of course, this department has looked at all aspects of this risk. And
So then why did you
this
send the
department
minesweepers, the only minesweepers we had in the Gulf, to Singapore weeks before the war started?
We have lots of capabilities that you may or may not be aware of at the classified level.
Okay, and
to deal
so,
with, to deal with
by the way, would the
mines.
Trump-class battleships have helped with this?
You're talking about a
Minesweeping.
prospective future battleship, which we welcome in the fleet.
Okay, so you're supportive of the battleships.
Yes, sir.
Okay. How much has Iran profited from your administration lifting the sanctions on Iran when you started this war?
I can tell you Iran is financially devastated right now.
Okay, well,
in conjunction with the
they've
Treasury
earned about
and
$14 billion.
Operation Economic Fury. They're at a point where between the blockade and what we've done to them militarily, remember, they don't have a Navy. They can't contest the blockade.
Okay.
Between what we've done to them
What kind of
militarily
a
and
Navy can
financially,
they buy
they're at a
for
place
$14 billion?
where they have very few options.
How many Chinese missiles can they buy for $14 billion? Does that sound like winning?
They're not. We're ensuring, and they're not buying Chinese missiles.
Okay. You know, at the end of the day, this also has a cost to us. If let's say this war costs $100 billion, I mean, you've already said, give us more time. It's only been 2 months. It could go on for 20 years like Iraq and Afghanistan. Let's just say it costs $100 billion. What is that to the average American taxpayer? Do you have any idea?
Well, unlike foolish previous administrations, it won't go on.
No, I'm just asking.
For years and decades.
But let's just say
Sitting in
it's
this
$100 billion.
position, it's hard to imagine how
You know
it was
that?
allowed those things to happen. You were a part
You
of
know
that
the
war.
answer to that?
So was I. And I never.
I'm
knew
just
what the end
asking if
state
you know
clearly
what
was.
your war
Now I
costs
know
the
what
average
end
American
state is.
taxpayer.
What is the cost of Iran having a nuclear weapon that they wield
I'm just
over us?
asking if you know the cost of the average American
I'm asking
taxpayer.
you what the
It's about
cost would be of
$600.
that.
So for the American taxpayers out there, my constituents, some of the constituents you wanted to represent in Minnesota, I'm just wondering if they have an extra $600 lying around to pay for your war. I think that's just a question that we ought to ask. Now, quickly, on March 13th in a press conference, you said we will give them no quarter, no mercy. In order for no quarter or no survivors is a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. You understand that's murder. Do you stand by that statement?
The Department of War fights to win, and we ensure that our warfighters have the rules of engagement necessary to be as effective
Okay, so
as
just to
humanly
be clear,
possible.
you
which
called
they are.
Democratic members of Congress to be tried for sedition for reminding our troops to follow the law. But when you tell them to commit a war crime, you stand by yourself.
For insinuating that the laws
Congratulations,
that we're
Mr.
giving them are
Gentleman's
unlawful.
time's
What a
expired.
breakdown.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee.
Let me just validate the feeling you probably had while watching that, because what you just saw was not a normal congressional hearing. This was a combat veteran sitting across from the Secretary of Defense and methodically dismantling him. Not with partisan attacks, not with gotcha theatrics, but with 3 simple questions that Hegseth had no honest answer to. Seth Moulton served 4 tours in Iraq as a Marine officer. He knows what a poorly planned war looks like from the inside. And when he started asking questions, he already knew where the answers were going. So let me walk you through what actually happened here, layer by layer, because there are at least 3 separate moments in this exchange that deserve your full attention. The first one I'd call the credibility collapse on basic facts. Hegseth opened by declaring this military campaign an astounding military success on the battlefield. That is a very large claim. So Moulton asked the only logical follow-up. Are we winning the war? Hegseth said, absolutely. Here is the problem. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. If you're not immediately sure why that matters, let me put it plainly. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical shipping lanes on the planet. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves through it. When that strait is disrupted, the ripple effects go global. Energy prices spike, shipping routes collapse, supply chains seize up. This is not a minor tactical skirmish. It is an economic pressure point that touches every American family, whether they know it or not. And when Moulton pressed Hegseth on this, his response was that we had blockaded their blockade. I want to be fair here, but we blockaded their blockade is not a military strategy. It is the logic of a schoolyard argument dressed up in Pentagon language. It says that because we responded to a catastrophic development, the catastrophic development doesn't count. Moulton made the comparison himself. It's like President Madison responding to the British burning Washington by saying, "Don't worry, we'll burn it down too." The point is not who escalated. The point is that the Secretary of Defense is measuring success by whether he matched the other side's chaos, not by whether he prevented it. That is a fundamentally different standard, and it should alarm you. Now let me get to the moment that I think connects most directly to your life. Moulton asked Hegseth a simple question. If this war cost $100 billion, not a fantasy number, given what Iraq and Afghanistan ultimately consumed, what does that mean for the average American taxpayer? Hegseth had no answer. He deflected to past administrations, to the hypothetical cost of Iran getting a nuclear weapon, to anything but the actual number. So Moulton gave it to him. $600. That is the per-taxpayer share of a $100 billion war. $600 from the family in Minnesota that Hegseth once wanted to represent as their senator. $600 from the people in your neighborhood who are already stretched thin by healthcare, by groceries, by everything Washington says it cannot afford to fix. Hegseth did not know that number. And I don't think that's a small thing. The people who send others into war should be the first ones to understand what war costs. Not in talking points, not in strategic abstractions, but in actual dollars extracted from actual people who had no vote in the decision. When your Secretary of Defense can't answer that question, it tells you something important about whose reality he is living in. It is not yours. And this connects to a pattern that I think is worth naming directly. There is a style of war leadership that mistakes confidence for competence. It speaks in superlatives, total success, complete domination, historic victory, while treating every inconvenient fact as either a distraction or an enemy talking point. When Iran closes the strait, that's not a strategic failure. It's a reason to spin harder. When the numbers don't add up, that's not a problem to solve. It's an excuse to attack the person doing the math. The danger is that this kind of communication is very effective at generating headlines and catastrophically bad at generating outcomes. The sailors navigating the Hormuz situation don't get to live in the spin. The economists watching energy markets don't get to pretend the disruption isn't real. The taxpayers who will eventually get the bill don't get a refund because the secretary sounded confident on television. They live in the consequences. Now I want to get to the third moment because this one is categorically different from everything else. This is not about strategy or economics. This is about the law of war and whether what we are doing meets the basic standard of civilized conduct in armed conflict. On March 13th, Hegseth stood in front of cameras and said, "We will give them no quarter, no mercy." Moulton asked him whether he stood by that statement. Hegseth did not walk it back. Here is what you need to understand. Under the Geneva Conventions, the rules governing armed conflict that the United States has signed, ratified, and is legally bound by, ordering that no quarter shall be given is a war crime. Full stop. It means ordering your forces to kill combatants who are attempting to surrender. It means offering no opportunity for capture. It means execute rather than detain. It is not motivational language. It is not tough rhetoric for the cameras. It is a prohibited order under international law, and the people who give such orders can be held criminally liable for what follows. Moulton made this point without yelling, without performing outrage, without giving Hegseth any room to claim he was being mischaracterized. He stated the legal standard and asked the secretary whether he stood by language that violated it. And this is where the hypocrisy becomes almost impossible to absorb. This is the same Pete Hegseth who has publicly called for Democratic members of Congress to face charges for reminding American troops to follow the law. Let me say that again so it lands. He wants to prosecute people for telling soldiers to obey the law, and in the same breath, he refuses to retract language that told soldiers to break it. That is not a partisan interpretation. That is a logical contradiction that exists entirely within his own public record. Either the law of war applies to American forces or it doesn't. Either following the Geneva Conventions is something we expect of our troops, or it isn't. You cannot simultaneously call for sedition charges against people who cite legal standards and then defend your own violation of those same standards as acceptable wartime rhetoric. The double standard isn't subtle here. It is structural. It is baked into how this administration approaches accountability. One standard for critics, a different one for itself, and apparently a third one for moments when the cameras are rolling at a press conference and nobody is expected to check the transcript. So what does all of this add up to? I think it adds up to a warning, not a partisan one, a structural one. When the person overseeing the most powerful military in history cannot tell you what the war costs per taxpayer, dismisses a closed strait as a technicality, and defends language that violates the Geneva Conventions, you are not watching a policy disagreement. You are watching the erosion of the basic expectation a man who had never seriously reckoned with the cost of what he was doing, measured in dollars, in legal obligations, or in the lives that his decisions touch. That should matter to you regardless of how you vote. The next war won't ask your party affiliation before it sends you the bill. If this breakdown was useful, share it with someone still trying to make sense of what they're watching. Subscribe for more analysis when the next hearing drops, because these moments of real congressional oversight, rare as they are sometimes the only times the people making these decisions are forced to answer for them out loud. And if we stop paying attention when that happens, we lose even that.